I kill my parents.
Pardon me?
Don't kill my parents.
We were put into maximum security prisons. These were very restrictive, violent prisons where we were constantly in chains, shackles, handcuffed.
I argued, and I still believe, that they should be out. They are a real family, real people who have lived through unimaginable horrors. And I'm hopeful and glad that we're one huge step closer to bringing the boys home.
After decades behind bars, the Menendez brothers' fight for freedom has taken a shocking turn. On August 21st, Erik Menendez sat in front of the parole board for more than 10 exhausting hours, fighting for the chance to live outside prison walls. But when the decision finally came down, the board ruled against him. Erik will stay locked away, with the possibility of parole pushed back another 3 years. His brother Lyall, however, would face his own parole hearing the very next day, leaving the world wondering, could either of the Menendez brothers ever walk free, or is this the end of the road?
The resentencing is, who are they now? Are they likely to reoffend? What have they done? Have they been good prisoners? Have they worked on themselves and in their community? And I can't think of two more exemplary people.
Erik's parole hearing was intense from the very beginning. Supporters painted him as a man who had grown, matured, and taken accountability. He spoke about the crime, admitted full responsibility, and showed visible emotion as he explained the years he spent reflecting behind bars. Yet no matter how sincere he appeared, the parole board wasn't convinced. They cited the severity of the crime, the brutal nature of the killings, and the premeditation involved. After 10 hours of arguments, witnesses, and testimony, the decision was clear. Erik would not be granted parole. He would remain behind bars. And as shocking as that was, this hearing reopened questions that had haunted America for more than 30 years. Because the Menendez story isn't just about two brothers killing their parents. It's about abuse, wealth, lies, and a trial that divided the country. But before we can understand why the parole board ruled the way it did, we need to go back to the very beginning, the night of August 20th, 1989.
What they have accomplished is remarkable, with no hope. And we've said that since day one. And so, with no hope, this encourages people who are incarcerated to make the right decisions, to take the right path. So it's just a win-win on so many levels.
That night, in their lavish Beverly Hills mansion, Jose and Kitty Menendez were shot to death while watching television. The killers? Their own sons, Lyall and Erik, then just 21 and 18 years old. The scene was brutal. The shotgun blasts left no doubt this wasn't an accident. It was cold-blooded. Within hours, whispers began spreading. Why would two wealthy young men, living lives most could only dream of, turn on their own parents? Early speculation pointed to greed. People thought the brothers wanted their inheritance, a fortune worth millions. The media ran with that narrative, painting them as spoiled rich kids who couldn't wait to get their hands on money. But when the truth started to come out, the story became far more complicated and infinitely darker. When the brothers were arrested and put on trial, they revealed something that shocked the nation. They claimed they had suffered years of abuse at the hands of their father, Jose. Erik, in particular, described horrific treatment, and Lyall backed up his account. Their defense wasn't about money. It was about survival. They claimed they believed their father would kill them if they didn't strike first. Suddenly, the trial wasn't just about murder. It became a psychological war. Were they calculating killers or broken sons acting out of desperation? America was split. Some saw them as victims, trapped in a house of terror. Others believed they were manipulating the system to excuse their actions. And as the cameras rolled in the courtroom, the Menendez brothers went from accused murderers to household names. When the brothers were arrested and put on trial, they revealed something that shocked the nation. They claimed they had suffered years of abuse at the hands of their father, Jose. Erik, in particular, described horrific treatment, and Lyall backed up his account. Their defense wasn't about money. It was about survival. They claimed they believed their father would kill them if they didn't strike first. Suddenly, the trial wasn't just about murder, it became a psychological war. Were they calculating killers or broken sons acting out of desperation? America was split. Some saw them as victims, trapped in a house of terror. Others believed they were manipulating the system to excuse their actions. And as the cameras rolled in the courtroom, the Menendez brothers went from accused murderers to household names. Their trial became one of the most sensational televised cases of the 1990s. Viewers tuned in day after day, glued to every tear, every outburst, every shocking revelation. It had everything: wealth, betrayal, family secrets, and violence. The first trial ended in a hung jury, leaving the nation frustrated and fascinated at the same time. But in 1996, after years of drama, both brothers were convicted of first-degree murder. The judge sentenced them to life in prison without the possibility of parole. For most people, that seemed like the end. The Menendez story was over, and the brothers would grow old behind bars. But time has a way of rewriting history, and decades later, their case resurfaced in a way no one expected. In May of this year, Los Angeles County Judge Michael Jessic made a ruling that changed everything. He reduced the brothers' sentences from life without parole to 50 years to life, giving them a shot at parole. The ruling was emotional. Inside the courtroom, both brothers broke down as the words sank in. Lyall stood and admitted with tears in his eyes, "I killed my mom and dad. I make no excuses. I take full responsibility." Erik, too, confessed his guilt and admitted that he had done everything in his power to cover up the crime. For the first time, the brothers appeared vulnerable, remorseful, and willing to face the full weight of what they had done. Supporters saw this as a chance at redemption. Critics saw it as a miscarriage of justice. But parole isn't decided in the courtroom. It's decided in hearings, where the board examines every detail of a prisoner's life. And for Erik, that meant facing a panel determined to weigh his past against his future. Erik's August hearing was grueling. Lawyers spoke on his behalf. Psychologists testified about his progress and mental health. Erik himself described years of reflection, growth, and change. He even brought up his medical struggles, explaining how recent kidney stone surgeries left him weak and vulnerable. He painted a picture of a man who was no longer dangerous, a man who had already served more than 3 decades behind bars. But the parole board wasn't swayed. To them, the crime was simply too horrific to overlook. They focused on the premeditation, the planning, and the brutality. They pointed out that Erik and Lyall not only killed their parents, but also tried to stage the crime scene to look like a mafia hit. They bought lavish items in the weeks after the killings, spending money as though nothing had happened. These details reminded the board that remorse today doesn't erase actions from the past. And so, despite emotional pleas, Erik's parole was denied. But while Erik left empty-handed, the larger conversation about the Menendez brothers exploded once again, because their story has never truly faded from the spotlight. For decades, the Menendez case has lived on in documentaries, podcasts, and dramatized TV shows. From news specials in the 90s to Netflix series watched by millions, the fascination never died. In fact, a new generation has discovered the brothers' story through TikTok and streaming platforms. Gen Z audiences in particular have taken an interest, with many young people sympathizing with the abuse allegations and viewing the brothers less as monsters and more as victims. The cultural shift has reignited debates. Were Erik and Lyall cold-blooded killers, or were they trapped in an unbearable cycle of trauma? And does more than 30 years in prison erase some of the anger that once fueled their sentencing? The fascination isn't slowing down. In fact, it's growing. And that makes the brothers' next parole hearings even more consequential. So where do things stand now? Erik's next shot at parole will come in 3 years. Lyall faced his own parole board just a day after Erik. with a decision that could shape how the justice system treats both brothers moving forward. For supporters, the hope is that decades of time served plus the abuse allegations prove enough for release. For critics, the concern is simple. Freeing the Menendez brothers would send the wrong message about accountability and justice. 35 years later, the wounds from this case still cut deep. Families remain divided, the public is still torn, and the brothers' fates hang in the balance. Whether they ever walk free again or remain behind bars for life, one thing is certain: the Menendez case will continue to haunt America.
The denied parole isn't the end of the story. It's just another chapter in a saga that refuses to die. The Menendez brothers have spent more than 3 decades paying for their crime, but their names still spark arguments, documentaries, and endless debate. And that leaves us with one haunting question: when does punishment end and forgiveness begin?